From the ashes of an empire to the plains of Dantooine, this is the legacy of Star Wars. Welcome back to the Legacy of Star Wars, your one-stop shop for all things Star Wars. Chances are you're not tuning in live because guess what? YouTube and Google gives you almost no help whatsoever when you start a new channel. So I will be doing a bit of multitasking here, making the people aware at our old channel that we are in fact live. But without further ado, my co-host for this evening, there's actually a lot to talk about. It was a eventful news week for Star Wars. Sounds like it could be an eventful news weekend for Star Wars. A couple of them actually in the next 3 weekends. First up, Randy, how's it going, man? How you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. I will say the music that you kind of led us into, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, man, that'd be perfect meditation music to just kind of sit there, that drone that really kind of zone you out to. So, but yeah, there really is a lot of Star Wars stuff going on. And obviously we got San Diego Comic-Con coming up, and um, I know D23 is this year. So I know there's going to be a lot coming out. So even though it's kind of a lull time, it's still exciting just because of all the news.
And look what the cat dragged in. He's back. He's wearing black, I think. And you know, the Acolyte is over. We don't have your thoughts on the finale in the series as a whole. And that's what this episode was going to be about until about 36 hours ago when Making Star Wars and Bestman Bulletin did their typical thing and dropped some pretty big Star Wars news. Johnny, what's going on, man? Are you
Oh,
hung over from the Acolyte?
I should be. We can get to that later. It's a big bag of mixed thoughts and emotions that I'll try and parse through for you guys in the back half of this show.
Well, some housekeeping right off the top here. If you're just tuning into the channel, thank you. You're probably seeing this after the fact, though. So click the like button, leave a comment, hit subscribe, turn notifications to all. This is going to be a sluggish journey here because there's 10 billion Star Wars channels, and we should have got, on the go with this a long while back. And you might be going, where's Kieran? Well, I think what we're going to be doing from now on is Kieran will be here for some episodes. Johnny will be here for some episodes. You might get that Tommy B guy in here for some episodes. And we'll choose the other guy based on what interests them most and availability. And on really big episodes where there's something massive to talk about, not that there isn't a huge update today, because I think there is. You'll get more than three of us. Um, Pardon me, I'm being interrupted by my um, my little one. So bear with me here for one moment as I allow mini Darth Vader in. Hello. Apologies, guys. Um, so right out of the gate, um, if you're new to the channel, thank you for being here. You might remember us from Fandom Empire. That has been rebranded Haddonfield and Beyond. If you want your Halloween and horror and Batman content, that is the place to go. Obviously, we are the Legacy of Star Wars. If you're looking for Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon content, you can check out the Legacy of Westeros, or you can check out our fourth channel, which you'll be able to find a little bit of everything else over there, whether it's Marvel, DC, wrestling, or just random rants. Check out Fandom Haven. Randy, I'm going to go to you first, man. We're going to go a little off topic here to buy me a couple of minutes here. Um, Before we get into the news, we are a week removed from the Acolyte. How are you feeling now? Just brief thoughts before we dive into it later on.
Well, it's definitely strange not watching something Star Wars before doing this. So I do kind of miss that a little bit. As far as how I feel about the finale and the season as a whole, I'm still pretty much in the same spot. Obviously I've watched some other content where people are either complaining or praising, and it's definitely been a mixed bag. Um, Obviously, there's going to be a lot of positive Pete's out there who are going to be very much into looking at what it did for the lore, um, how it sets up certain characters that we've actually been looking forward to. But then, of course, you have all the other people who are just being negative about it and saying, "Oh, this ruined canon," or "Why is this woke?" or just trying to just be your typical troll. But for me, I'm good. I still feel the same as last week, and I know we'll get into it, but I'm still kind of hoping to get more news on potential second season. But obviously, we'll talk about that a little bit later.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's talk a little bit about our plans coming up here and some of the things we intend to do on the channel. One of the things we have coming is, and this is just something we've talked about recently, um, is we're going to do a deep dive into some lightsaber duels, and we're going to have everybody that's participating in our content on air chime in and give their thoughts, and we'll probably break it down into 2 episodes and rank the top 10 lightsaber duels ever in Star Wars. And there was a lot of talk about Leslie Headland aiming to top um, the Duel of Fates from the Phantom Menace, and it's great and all, but I don't think she did that. And I think there's incredible lightsaber combat in the Acolyte. I just feel like when you talk about a lightsaber duel and the way it's presented, it can't just be about the way people move. It's got to be lighting choices, it's got to be cinematography, action, how it bleeds into the story, the characters involved in it. Presentation's such a massive part of it. The score on top of that. Um, and like, I know some people might be like, you're talking about a lightsaber duel. That other stuff shouldn't matter. That other stuff absolutely does matter, because if you score a lightsaber duel wrong, it takes you completely out of it. So we're going to be doing like probably a 2-part series on that, where I would think we would go 10 through 6 in one video and like really deep dive into each one of them. The nice thing is a lot of them are on YouTube, so we can pull them up here on our streams with us. So that's nice. Um, and then we're gonna do some watch parties. Uh, the watch parties will probably be movie based. And then the other thing we're gonna do, Randy just mentioned it. It's kind of weird coming on here and not talking about a Star Wars TV show, but this is kind of like a rebirth of what we're doing, and this gives us the ability to go back and rewatch some things. And so the 2 shows that I have listed that I want to get to are Andor, because Andor is well, I shouldn't say just around the corner, but it's not too far in the distant future. And then a look back at Kenobi. It'd be cool to go through the 6 episodes of that again. I think the closer we get to a Mandalorian and Grogu movie. I know, I don't think any of us like that title. The Mandalorian and Grogu. Hopefully, somebody comes to their senses there. Um, Although I'm not holding my breath on it. We'll probably revisit all 3 seasons of The Mandalorian. And we did Ahsoka like last year, the 3 of us. So to do it again doesn't seem advantageous. But yeah, so we're gonna dive into some Star Wars series, and we'll do those episode by episode. We're not gonna come on here and talk about the entire Kenobi series. We'll come on here and talk about episode 1, and then the next week episode 2, and we'll do the same thing with Andor. I want to highlight a comment here. I don't think this person's in here anymore, but I found this comment kind of interesting. What about the Grisk attack on Thrawn and the Chiss? Well, one would hope that that is where all this is leading. Whether that will pan out or not, I'm not entirely sure. um, I've stopped betting on Disney making reliable decisions a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But without further ado, gents, let's get to some news and deep dive into a discussion, a debate of sorts, and see where this goes. Um, so, Making Star Wars and Bespin Bulletin both reported, I believe it was yesterday, that um, the Mandalorian Grogu has actually already begun filming. And the reason for that is, and it sounds like they filmed towards anywhere from late May through the middle of June. And the reason for that was scheduling conflicts. In fact, now that I'm using two devices, I should be able to go like this. And one second here. Because of schedule conflicts, which I don't know if you guys know this, but the guy who voices Mando is a pretty busy dude these days. And I think we've spoken at length on previous incarnations of our show about how it can be a little off putting that we never get to see him. So it does sound like we are, in fact, going to see. Um, there we go. It does sound like we're going to see Pedro Pascal in this actual thing, which is nice. The Mandalorian Grogu was initially widely. That's terrible grammar. Um, and it's not just me saying it, it's how it's written. The Mandalorian Grogu was initially widely reported to begin filming in mid June. Reports from Collider, myself, and even Din Djarin actor Brendan Wayne, that is the grandson of John Wayne. Um, June has come and gone with no updates on the start of filming. Over a week ago, I reported that principal photography on the Jon Favreau flick had yet to begin, despite initial plans for an official June start. The delay in filming is absolutely nothing to worry about. The Mandalorian Grogu isn't set to hit theaters for another 22 months. Lucasfilm has plenty of time to make sure the script is to standard and principle. Principal photography would run for around 3 to 4 months, given the production plenty of time in post. A reliable insider making Star Wars has offered an update on the situation about the upcoming flick via the social network Threads. So I guess people actually use that, huh? Threads. I never did download it. So um, he recently shared images of the sets from The Mandalorian Grogu, which I did see. And he revealed principal photography has yet to begin on the flick, though Lucasfilm did film scenes with a limited cast, likely due to time sensitivity around certain cast members. MSW added that principal photography um, added that principal. See, this is terrible. This guy needs to check his grammar, and I'm no grammar police either. Um, what's considered to be the more official start of filming uh, with occur. I think he means will occur in El Segundo, which I believe is in California, in around 3 weeks' time. So, your best bet is to go listen to the Making Star Wars episode. Um, I listened to the whole thing. It's a little over an hour long, and in a nutshell, they basically say it's Pedro Pascal. He's busy. He's doing a bunch of different things, and he had to get in shooting for that, and he had to get in shooting for The Last of Us season 2 in a quick manner of time. And then Mercedes Monet, is that her real name, by the way?
No.
Mercedes Monet. Okay, Mercedes whatever.
Barnado.
Yeah.
Um, also let it slip in an interview on the weekend that she had to go do some filming things in June, which would make sense if she's involved in the movie in some way, shape, or form. Um, I guess, guys, before we get into the Thrawn of it all, initial thoughts on them going out of their way, I guess you could say, to accommodate what we believe is Pedro Pascal filming for what might have been 2 weeks, it sounded like. Um, is this good? Is this bad? Is this, are you trying to Frankenstein a project too much to get it all to work? How do we feel about, Pedro being so busy that he's got to film his stuff basically a couple of months before they actually get to the official principal photography? Randy?
Well, I mean, when you are the one of the hottest actors in Hollywood and everybody wants you for something, you got to do what you do what you do. And the thing is with the Mandalorian, you know, if that's all the time he had available, that's all the time he had available. And I'm going to assume at some point, if he's needed for reshoots and he can squeeze it in, he'll, do what he has to do. Uh, Obviously, his biggest role is going to be more in the recording booth anyway. And, it's good to know that we're going to get to see him actually, in the suit. Hopefully it's done in a way, hopefully the scenes are done in a way that, similar to what we saw in like season 2 and season 1, where he absolutely had to have the helmet off versus um, any other time when he's just gallivanting around with the helmet on. Um, Beyond that, though, if they got him even for 2 weeks just to get stuff done, that's fine. As long as we get to see him, we'll hear him. But it's like as long as we get to see him too, and it's done well, it's really not going to be that big of an issue. Same with Mercedes there, whatever role she has in terms of how big or small it's going to be. Uh, Obviously, she'll have her helmet off here and there, and that's been kind of par for the course for her character anyway. So ultimately, I'm just happy that there's traction, there's something there, and now it's time to really kind of dig in and start getting into the meat and potatoes of it all, and really, giving some better updates. Like, hey, we got a name change coming. That's we're not it ain't Mandalorian Grogu. It's Mandalorian. Return of Thrawn or just something different. I mean, God bless. I'm gonna bitch, piss, and moan until they finally change that name. It's never gonna stop.
Johnny, how about you, man? What's your gut tell you?
I'm happy about it because it means something's actually being done on this project, which in Star Wars is something that far too often goes off the rails far too early in production. So, actually getting something in the can and, progressing forward in such a way tells me that they're confident in the script. They're not going to make any major groundbreaking changes at this stage of production, and they can actually put stuff in the can, get eyes on it, start seeing some dailies and fill out the schedules for certain people who are more, I don't want to say critical, but who are more in demand in their other avenues, which I like as a, from a production standpoint, taking that into account, not, holding an entire project hostage because of one actor or actress's schedule, as we've seen so often in, Star Wars and other projects out there where this happens. So, obviously Din without the helmet isn't something that's going to take a large portion of the film. It's just not. And anybody who expecting otherwise is setting themselves up for, you know, completely being let down. Because I don't think you're going to see Din without the helmet for any more than 10 minutes, across the entirety of a full, close to 2 hour film. So, doing it now and getting it in, I think is fine because it's not something that's. It's going to be a moment that is probably something somewhere at the emotional core of the film, I think. It's not just going to be for a random bit because they'd just be wasting it. So it has to be something with some degree of emotion, just based on the times we've seen Din take off his helmet in the past. So getting this in there, getting it done, I think is great. The same for other people who have more, rigid scheduling. in their other endeavors in life is great. Um, it excites me a little bit, because it is getting us to a point where we have something to talk about for one, and like I said, it progresses it forward where who knows, we may get to see something sooner than we expect. Like I don't think we're gonna see any sort of crazy footage, at San Diego or at uh, at D23, but I think it's entirely possible we might get a little BTS teaser type thing going on for this. See some behind the scenes footage, see Din on the set, see John and Dave on the set and things like that. So we may get a glimpse of this thing in the I'd say very near future. I think it's possible, and it excites me because you actually get to lay eyes on something.
Yeah, I want to be confident in this thing. I do, but we know damn well that they were going to do Mando season 4 and scrapped it in favor of a movie, and then started editing it down until um it could, let's be honest, Star Wars TV shows aren't the 8-hour extravaganzas that we were promised. They're more like 4 hours and 20 minutes. But still, you're not getting a 4 hour and 20-minute Star Wars movie. You probably got to cut that in half. And then it's like, does it even work? You know, they've had a chance to hear reception from Ahsoka season 2 rather than plunge headfirst into Mando season 4. No doubt that's where some of the Thrawn stuff comes into play that we'll touch on soon. Um, I just, Randy's eventually going to come to the computer screen and punch me in the face for continuously bringing this up. But like, Johnny, have you been watching House of the Dragon?
Yeah.
It's really it's getting really hard for me to watch a show like that and then watch not all the episodes of The Acolyte, but most of them, and go, this show can look this good, and this show looks like it was filmed in my backyard. That's a problem. It really is. Star Wars is supposed to be this magical, big scale thing. And hey, if the storytelling was done and executed on such an incredible level, you could probably look past that stuff. And some people, um, I like to refer to them as the Gold Star Brigade, who just dish out nothing but positivity for Star Wars, which in itself can be negative. Um, Go, well, Star Wars isn't supposed to be like that. It's like, no, Star Wars is absolutely intended to be a big blockbuster thing, and even
It's
though
always been the cutting edge.
for sure, and not just I'm not knocking stagecraft, but there's good stagecraft and there's bad stagecraft, and if you go and listen to that Making Star Wars episode they put out yesterday, they basically said they know there's going to be some location shooting, so it's not all going to be stagecraft, but a good chunk of it is going to be what you see in the TV series. And it just made me go, wah, wah, wah. Like or not Thor Ragnarok, Thor Love and Thunder tried to go and do that. Go look at the scale of the previous Thor movies and then go watch that fourth one and tell me that you don't notice that a bunch of it is shot on a tiny, small stagecraft set. Like Star Wars, you're supposed to feel immersed in Star Wars. I know you said you couldn't get through the first couple episodes of Andor, man, but for me, Andor's been really the only one lately that's made me go, okay, this is a big grand scale still. Um, I don't know. Like I feel like I'm trying to be as positive as I can about this movie because I love the thought of you and me and a bunch of other people going opening night and Randy going opening night and all of us meeting back up that same night and doing a big recording and us talking about it being if we're keeping expectations realistic, a good Star Wars movie. Hey, this was a good return to cinemas. I just have a really hard time envisioning that. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on, mentally anyway, where you are in terms of your expectations out of this movie, knowing that no matter how you spin it, it is a little bit of a Frankenstein type project.
Oh, well, it's one of those things where you have to really look at all the all the parts people are playing in this. I know you mentioned the Thor movies, and I remember with the very first one, Kenneth Branagh, tried to bring that Shakespearean feel to the script and the story, but also they built that entire town from the ground up. They built it in the middle of the desert just so they could film there. So I get that part of you trying to say, making sure the setting is right and making sure that, the attention to detail is there and that the production quality is high. And I get that part. And I think mentally where I am with this is knowing that, John Favreau, knows his stuff. I know he's going to put his best foot forward, especially as long as no one really interferes with him. We should get something good. We know Filoni's going to have his say with this as well. So I'm in a good spot given the track records of the people involved. Um, Obviously, if we see some interference from Disney on this, then we know that there's going to be some issues here. But for the most part, I think when it comes to Favreau and Filoni, they'll just probably let them do their thing. At least that's what I'm hoping. That's the glass half full thing. Let those guys just do their job, tell the story they want to tell, and let them give us something that we haven't had in a while. Because people are going to want something that's going to wash the taste of the Rise of Skywalker out of their mouth to get them to come out and go to the theater to see something like this. Or they're over the small screen stuff, and that the last thing they really enjoyed maybe was Ahsoka and not the Acolyte, because it sounds like or maybe by that time with Andor season 2 coming out, they'll have everybody will be a little more positive and be more energetic and waiting for this. Obviously, we don't know what we're getting out of Skeleton Crew, so that's going to be hit or miss. Chances are it'll probably be a miss from all the news report around it saying it's just been a mess. So yeah, I'm just going to put my faith in the guys involved, and I'm just going to kind of be that half glass full guy.
Johnny?
I, like you said, Star Wars has always been the cutting edge of technology, and in the George Lucas era. In the Disney era, it hasn't been. And that's not a knock, because not everyone can be the sort of technological visionary that George was. That's a skill he had that is second to none. So if there's complaints about George, being able to see technology and get the most out of technology is not one of them, and never could be one of them. But it it has left something to be desired in some instances. I think, like you said, there's good stagecraft and there's bad stagecraft, and you can definitely tell the difference between the two when you look at it at that level. I admit, to me, it hasn't ever really been that big of an issue. There's very few times where the stagecraft has taken me out of it, and I'm thankful for that. But I know for someone like you, obviously, where you put more into into that level of the production and the technologies and the stuff like that, that it has that effect on you, and it sucks, but I don't know that I don't know how much, like, I like that happy medium, where you can use a stagecraft and still be practical, because nothing will ever beat practical, in anything. There are very few moments that I can look at in cinema and be like, wow, this is so much better than anything you could have gotten in a practical effect. Like, there are very few instances of that. The only one that comes to mind for me is the Battle of Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings. That's one that just from the sheer numbers, practically that was impossible. But technologically, they made it work, and they made it work well. But I don't know. It, it all comes down to the story they tell, the places they film, what types of environments they use the stagecraft for versus what they don't. That it, it could be a good thing and a bad thing. I think obviously with a full cinematic theatrical budget, you get more ability to, I don't want to say refine, but to make it look better, to make it look more scaled up. And as long as you use all of the sort of uh, assets at your disposal, through Lucasfilm and all of that stuff that, you know, ILM and all of those places, if you use them to their full potential, then you could be looking at something magnificent, or you could be looking at something that's like, oh, this is a Disney Plus budget, and I don't like that. As long as you go full board, give it the budget it needs to get done what you want to get done, and then see that through, I have confidence that they can achieve that at the cinematic level because, they have to a degree. There's this is really the first movie, the Star Wars movie, where they've had this technology at their disposal. So it'll be interesting to see how they use it, how they put it together, and all of that stuff. So it's exciting, and at the same time, it's terrifying. And until we actually see the movie in the theater, I can't really say anything because no matter what we see before then, even the trailers and what have you, they're still they're trailer cuts. They're not what you're going to see on the big screen. So until we see it on the big screen, I will, withhold judgment on how they do with that. So I'm cautiously optimistic, I'll say.
You know, I'm trying to get to that point where I can be cautiously optimistic and look at it for what it is. And I think a lot of it's going to depend for me on if it feels like a movie. You know, I'm sorry, the Acolyte and a lot of the other Star Wars Disney Plus things don't feel like TV series. They cut off in like the middle of a scene, and that's the end of the episode. And it picks back up next episode. It's like, oh, this isn't a series. This is some 4+ hour thing that you're just breaking up into 8 parts. If it feels like a movie, which has different DNA than a TV show, and it almost doesn't matter what TV show you're watching. It can be Supernatural that gives you 23 episodes a season. It can be Game of Thrones, which gave you as little as 6 or as many as 10 episodes a season. Similar to House of the Dragon. I think Sherlock's had 3 episode seasons at times. Things are everywhere. Um, but to me, it still needs to feel like a movie. And if it doesn't, then it's like I don't know if people understand how much is riding on this movie. This cannot be Indiana Jones and whatever the hell the title was to the latest movie. Because I got news for you. You're not seeing another indie movie for a very, very long time, if ever again. And it probably won't include Harrison Ford unless he's in the Sean Connery like role. And some might argue he was already there in the last movie. Um, Star Wars is coming off of a massive loss in The Rise of Skywalker. It's coming off of Rogue Squadron canceled. You know, it's coming off of the fact that Rogue Squadron should have already been out for a year already, and it got axed. TV series have been delayed. Ryan Johnson's trilogy, what happened to it? The Game of Thrones guys movies, what happened to it? Um, Donald Glover What happened to it? We don't even know what happened to the droid story, like straight to Disney Plus movie sort of thing they were planning. Like, go back and look at when Kathleen Kennedy and company made the announcement for all these different Star Wars projects, and then count how many have actually come out and how many we believe are canceled. It's staggering. They need a win here. I'm not saying it needs to do Deadpool and Wolverine numbers. I'm not even saying it needs to make $1 billion worldwide. But people need to be able to go see this movie and go, okay, I'm in for Star Wars movies. I'll see the next one, whether it has anything to do with this one or not. If it flops, if it does solo numbers, if it gets the critical reception that Rise of Skywalker got, it's. I'm not saying it's curtain call here, fellas, but like, I don't know where you go after that. Any thoughts?
I mean, I
Well,
think it's.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Randy.
It's all
Who
you, man.
talks? You talk, I talk, you talk, I talk.
Got to step on each other's toes at least once in a podcast. It's just the rules. Um, I think that it's for me. It's safe to say that if the super team that is Filoni and Favreau, the handpicked right hand of George Lucas and someone who has managed to basically single-handedly create the superhero genre as we know it today, can't pull out something here, can't pull the rabbit out of this hat, then I think it's curtains on this era of Star Wars. Like, it's pack it up, we're going home. That's it. There's no saving it. There's Disney's not gonna keep putting bad money into it if it's not making it. And I know you'll argue, well, the box office is still good. Yeah, sure, it is. But comparatively, it's not. Because as great as the box office numbers are, this is still a movie that's only making, you know, 2 or 3 times its budget, if that. And that's not a good look for something like this. These are movies where you need to be, 5 to 10 times your budget. And that's full budget, not just, filming. It's the whole production budget, the whole kit and caboodle, everything, merchandising, all that stuff wrapped into it. You need to be 5 to 10 times that number. And I don't think we've come close to that since maybe episode 7.
I think The Last Jedi hit it. Rogue One hit it. But after that, the other two are misses.
So, I mean, it's just this. You can't keep this string of lack of success going. This would be the third film in succession under this, you know, partnership and creative direction that if they don't pull it together, then that's it. It has to be. And a lot of fans have been calling for Kathleen Kennedy's head since day one. But I think that if this flops, if this does not go over the way that it should, the way that we want it to, then I think it has to be. That has to be it, for her time as the head. Because, not just do you have the failures in Star Wars, but add in, Indiana Jones, which vastly underperformed, both critically and at the box office. It just, there's been no major success from this group in so long that you have to, at that point, wash your hands of it and say, we're not the problem, you're the problem, time to go. We need to start making some money here, and we need to figure out somebody else to do that.
I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, you really aren't wrong. But also, I feel like they oversaturated the market. Like when they're trying to pump out, you know, episode 7, then Rogue One. But see, here's the thing: those were a year apart. The Last Jedi, a year apart, and then 6 months later they throw out Solo. after such a divisive movie with The Last Jedi, they oversaturated the market, and they put something out, I think, to me, just too soon after um, people having to get that bitter taste out of their mouth. And I think it may have done better in a December release slot than May, but we'll never know. I mean, that's just my thoughts on that. Um, but as far as I think what we need here is just to let Favreau and Filoni do their thing. No interference. Let them do what they need to do to deliver the best product they possibly can. And you're right, Johnny. Favreau should be able to really give us something special just because he did kind of help create the modern superhero scene with the original Iron Man, and the original Iron Man was phenomenal. But with Filoni now being the head of creative and getting the chance to really put his stamp on things, this is a real big opportunity to take this movie and steer it in the direction towards where he was going with Ahsoka, so that we can get that cohesive story that's going to lead to what we're all hoping is the recasting of Han, Luke, and Leia. We're going to get this huge, gigantic, galaxy-wide, almost all-out war, which we're kind of hoping for because of things that Thrawn has said in Ahsoka and things we've seen in the books. And there's a lot riding on it because we can finally get that space opera, that epic space opera that we got with the original trilogy. And I think, and is it a high standard? Yes, it's a very high standard to try to hit, but they can do it. They just need to be given the time and the resources to tell the story they want to tell. And I think if Disney's smart, they'll do it just so that, because they need the win. Disney needs a win. I mean, yeah, they're going to get a win this weekend with, Deadpool and Wolverine. That thing's going to blow up. Of course, the marketing for that has been all over the place, and I absolutely love it. But you're not going to get away with that with Star Wars. There's just something about Deadpool that the way they market it, it's being done the only way you can do a Deadpool marketing campaign. That's just how it is, and it's absolute genius. And of course, obviously, unfortunately, I think they're going to push Grogu to the forefront to market this movie, which is fine because that's who people know. Obviously, they can sit there and throw some Pedro Pascal in there as well, considering how popular he is. And you might be able to really, get a lot of people to go just because of those two. But for the fans who have been there since day one, we need a win. And we need Disney to just kind of back off and let these guys do their thing. And if they can do that, I think there's potential for something special here. And we just, unfortunately, until we actually see like what the story is and how this is all going to fit into Filoni's ultimate vision, all we can do is speculate.
Well, seeing headlines like this doesn't give me too much hope, and albeit it is from the end of May, this has been making circles the last few days, and um, from Collider, Kathleen Kennedy says Star Wars won't be changing for those complaining. Is one of the most tone deaf things you could fucking say, and again, I like parts of the Acolyte. I truly do. I like the story they were trying to tell. I like, a good chunk of Ahsoka. I don't like the way they present all their TV shows not named Andor, because Tony Gilroy has a backbone and actually says, "No, this is the way I'm going to do things, and if you don't like it, then I'm not doing it." Um, but everything else, like, it's it's a really stupid thing to say. Kind of like we don't have source material to draw from. She needs to stop talking to the media. Let Dave Filoni talk to the media. Let creatives talk to the media, because all she manages to do is stir up the fan base. I don't even mean the toxic ones that just want to shit on everything, but like, there's no positive spin on this headline. It's like, okay, so if the movie flops and if your TV shows continue to not do great, you're just going to keep doing the same thing. The fucking definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. It drives me nuts. And I'd love to sit here and say Johnny could be right, and if it flops, you know, her head finally rolls. I just don't know if that's the case. She seems unsackable at this point, and it's not even like I think she's a bad person or anything. I don't think that at all. But I do think that, much like in a lot of sports, sometimes a change of scenery is a good thing. And or a new captain guiding the ship is a good thing. You know, Dave Filoni can be the head of story now all he wants. He still has to answer to Kathleen Kennedy, you know? And I don't know. Until I see change, um, it's hard to get too much confidence behind some of the projects. But I will hope for the best. But you usually have to earn these things. You know, change is earned and effort is put in, and Johnny's probably right. Like, say the Mandalorian goes out there and it flops and it barely breaks even, or even loses money, and it's critically smashed, not in a good way. Um, that's probably it for this era Star Wars. That will probably get the Disney axe. And then how long do you wait before you get whatever comes next? Because you're back to the drawing board at that point. And how old will we be then? Like, not to sound selfish, but I am a ill mid-30s guy who probably doesn't have, several decades left of his life. I'd like to see more Star Wars. I would like to experience going to the cinema with my kids. It doesn't need to be The Empire Strikes Back, although I'd be, thrilled if it was. Just be acceptable at this point. And even that, to me, is an incredibly low bar when talking about the Star Wars name. Um, Thrawn, the other part of the Making Star Wars Investment Bulletin conversation was, while they couldn't confirm it, they believe that Thrawn will be in the movie. Now, it doesn't mean he is the villain of the movie, but rather towards the end of the movie to set up what comes next, whether it's Ahsoka season 2, the Dave Filoni movie itself, but that Thrawn will play a role. And it makes sense because Thrawn has gotten back to known space now. Um, the bigger Thrawn is, as long as one Mandalorian's not going to make him look like a chump, the bigger Thrawn is, the better the movie will be, in my opinion. Your guys on Thrawn more than likely being a part of the Mandalorian movie. And I'm just going to keep referring to it as the Mandalorian movie because I hate the fucking title.
I think what we need out of Thrawn is we need Thrawn getting the dub. We need to see him come back. I think part of this movie does need to see him come back to known space and like the effects of it, and the fact that he appears unstoppable, and kind of try to ramp up everything from his perspective. So, like you're saying, leading into Ahsoka season 2 and leading into the Filoni movie, and just trying to get the pieces in place for this, grandiose plan they have. But I don't see Din or even, Bo-Katan or any of the other Mandalorian really being, a thorn in Thrawn's side, but so much. Obviously, once his return, I'm going to expect certain characters to show up. But beyond that, you can't defeat Thrawn right off the bat. You have to let him win. You have to. His plan has to start bearing fruit. Obviously, the first part of his plan was getting back to known space. There's his first win. Rarely ever did he truly lose whether it was, the books or Rebels, he always had a backup plan, or he always had an idea. Hey, these are acceptable losses. I planned for this. I just wanted, and I think that's maybe what we'll get, is maybe it'll be him going, you know what, this is acceptable losses. This is what I expected going up against the Mandalorians. I wanted to see where we were with our strategies. Like, there's just maybe that's how it's going to play out. But ultimately, if you're going to bring Thrawn in, he's going to, I mean, it's almost a must to have him basically take home the dub by the end of the movie, because even though, yes, he may have lost some forces, yes, he may have some things maybe a little bit slowed down, ultimately his plan still goes forward unhindered to some degree, because he planned for it, because he knew there were there was going to be something he was going to lose anyway, and that's always how he's always played it off. When you watch any episode of Rebels he's in, he's just like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. It's all good. We're good. Or he would just be like, well, I guess you're in trouble. I'm not. Peace out. Like, he always had a plan. And that's what I want to see when it comes to Thrawn in this movie.
I think Thrawn is at his best when he's 3 steps ahead. As a character, he has always been the most visceral, cutthroat, and thought-provoking villain or anti-villain, wherever you want to call him, depending on the story arc, in Star Wars. His goals. He is the character whose goals are most personal. You know, where other characters and villains in Star Wars thrive for power, Thrawn thrives for knowledge and success. Both for himself, for his people, and for those he surrounds himself with. So I think obviously bringing Thrawn back in and making him the villain is the smartest thing you can do, because I think Star Wars is at its best when the villain is smarter than everybody else. In that sort of regard. Palpatine was the ultimate puppet master. You saw him pull the strings through the entirety of the prequel trilogy, and then in the original trilogy, you saw him where he made his plans, and that was more the ball of yarn unraveling slowly with his still great plans. And even from my estimation, that's Rogue One is obviously the best of the non-linear films, was at its best because it had a villain who was in that mold. Krennic was a guy who used his mind. It wasn't just brawn and brute force and I'm stronger than you, I have the force. He would outthink you, and it worked really well. That now you have, and then if you look at the sequel trilogy, they didn't have that. There was nobody using their brain. There was no thought. There was no planning. There was no puppet master pulling the strings, because it was such a disjointed trilogy that they had no idea what was going on. There was nobody to pull the strings because you had no idea who was pulling the strings. Like, you could argue, oh, JJ knew what he was doing. He had a plan. Oh, he didn't. He did 7, had a plan for that. And then Ryan sort of threw the plan out in 8 and went his own direction. And then JJ had to come in, clean it up, tie the stuff Ryan did back in with the stuff he did, and try and make it make sense, and shoehorned in Palpatine. And it didn't work because it was chaos. It was throw everything in the soup and boil it and hope that the stew tastes right. Well, it didn't. It did not taste right. It tasted awful. It tasted like you took an Italian dish, mixed it with a Chinese dish, and put it in a broth and tried to make something that tastes delicious. Individually, those dishes might taste delicious, but together, they taste like dog crap. And that's the sequel trilogy in a nutshell. Individually, they might be good. Together, they're awful. And that's what we need here. We need that plan, that forethought, that scheming villain that, George did so well, because even when, some of the writing was not great in the prequel trilogy, you still had Palpatine at his peak, pulling the strings and making things go the way he wanted and doing all of that, and having Filoni, who learned at the right hand, who learned from George, who, got to basically apprentice under George, has a better understanding of that. And you've seen that. You've seen it in Rebels. You saw it in the Clone Wars, where those are projects that we look at and say, yeah, those fit with the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, because they do. Because even though they're different, they still feel at home in this greater Star Wars universe, because all of the things that George did were things he taught Dave, and Dave's brought to the table, and now we get a chance to see that in the big screen. So I'm expecting Thrawn to be the chess player. You're playing checkers, he's playing chess. I'm excited to see that. Does he need to win at the end? I don't know about win. His plan needs to play out in such a way that his goals are achieved, whatever they are. We still don't know his plan. And that's a good thing, because we
Oh
don't know.
man, you don't think he needs to win? Do we need the end of the Last Jedi
No,
slash Rise of Skywalker Part
I don't
Two?
mean he needs to win in the sense of he needs to win under his plan. Like, if we don't know what his plan is yet. That's the thing. Like, if his plan is to come back and reestablish the Empire, to sort of he probably is aware of Palpatine's plans, as far as surviving past potential deaths and plans for that. So, you know, eh, it all comes down to what his plan is, what success of his plan looks like. Success in his plan might actually be him being defeated, as long as it furthers his goal forward, which, whatever that goal is, because he's Thrawn. Sometimes you have to lose to win. And if anybody can understand that, it's Thrawn.
I guess the thing I worry about is people go, well, the First Order won in the Last Jedi, and it's like, did they? Did they really? Like, yeah, they eliminate a bunch of the resistance and have them on the run, but you have, Luke Skywalker, who isn't really there, make Kylo Ren look like a complete fucking fool in front of all of his men, and then they get away, and you have sort of like the happy, heartfelt ending on the Falcon, and then you get Broom Boy, which that went nowhere, and um, you know, the Force Awakens, was kind of like a hopeful ending because we get the meeting with Luke at the end. Um, the Solo movie, it's a lighthearted comedy movie of sorts. So like, its ending is fun. The only one that really gives you a dark ending out of the new movies is Rogue Squadron, or pardon me, Rogue One, and even that ends with Leia. The final shot is Leia. Like, yeah, everybody dies and Vader comes on and wreaks havoc for about 45 seconds, but um we haven't gotten a Revenge of the Sith. We haven't gotten an Empire Strikes Back. And I don't mean that the movies need to be that level of quality, because then I think you're setting yourself up for unrealistic expectations. Um, which, by the way, we went to see Twisters on the weekend, and the person serving us at the snack bar, on his name tag, it didn't have his name. His name tag was Revenge of the Sith. And I caught it. I'm like, oh, that's cool, man. It's my second favorite Star Wars movie. Um, so that was fun. But yeah, I think you need a win. The problem is it's the first Star Wars movie back, and I don't think we're gonna get it. I think, like, in terms of the villains getting a win, I think they'll set up things for Filoni's movie, and more TV content. But at the end of the day, I think we're gonna be looking more at a happy-go-lucky ending. And like, just look at the title of the fucking movie, people. It's The Mandalorian and Grogu, right? Like, is the focus going to be about telling a good story, or is it going to be pushing as much Grogu merch as they possibly can? Which, by the way, maybe they need to realize this is not as hot as it used to be. They kind of missed their window on that. And speaking of missed windows or upcoming windows, want to get the ball rolling here. Bespin Bulletin also reports Lucasfilm tapped the Atom Project writer. I've never seen that, but I know people speak highly of it. He also did Banshee. Jonathan Tropper to pen Sean Levy's Star Wars movie. The other piece of this was covered by Jeff Snyder. Actually, I believe Jeff Snyder was the first one to break this when some people put out some fake reports about. I wouldn't say fake reports because Jeff Snyder alluded to the original trilogy being the original big three being recast for a future movie, but never confirmed that report, never put that out on his newsletter, as some people were saying. And, I myself jumped to a conclusion because you hope people don't lie about shit. But guess what? It's social media. That's all they do, which is frustrating. But the other caveat here is Sean Levy was offered Avengers before they went back to the Russos. And Levy turned down at least Avengers 5 to focus on his Star Wars movie. Levy's also coming off of Deadpool and Wolverine here. He did Free Guy, I think it was.
Mhm.
Um, so he's a frequent collaborator with Ryan Reynolds. Maybe that gives me some hope that they
Adam Reynolds
go.
was in the Atom Project, wasn't he?
Was he?
I think so. I think that was his. It was either a Prime movie or a Netflix movie. I'm pretty sure that was him.
So he really is a frequent collaborator. If anything, maybe it gives you hope that you want to sell a Star Wars movie, people. You want to do it. You show up at Ryan Reynolds' place, whether it's his BC home or his California home or the local Tim Hortons somewhere, and you say, "Look, man," and it doesn't have to be, break the fourth wall shit either. Ryan Reynolds is he's a fun actor. Um, how many zeros is it going to take for you to come and be a big part of one of these movies? Um, that would help, you know? Um, but I do find it mildly confident that, or I'm mildly confident in this project, knowing that Sean Levy is so excited about it that he turned down Avengers 5. Like, turning down any Avengers movie, regardless of who you may or may not have access to, um, is a pretty big deal. And to stick with the Star Wars project, um, it gives me some hope. But I did listen to Bespin Bulletin and Making Star Wars also suggests that we might not get the Levy movie till like 2029 or some shit. And it's like, oh God, like I know I'm always don't rush, take your time, do it right, but like 5+ years is a long time to wait. Your guys' thoughts on this news? I haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine, so I can't really comment on that. I know he's had a role to play in Stranger Things. Haven't seen the Adam Project. Did see Free Guy. That was fun. He's in demand in Hollywood. Not a lot of names these days, you know, dropping other offers to stick with the Star Wars project. Thoughts?
Well, I mean, it just shows he's devoted to the fact that he wants to make a Star Wars movie, and I think that's something that we need out of people that are getting the opportunity. Um, like we know, like with Taika Waititi, he's more focused on his other projects rather than the Star Wars movie that supposedly was supposed to be doing. But no, I mean, given the track record of this guy and the stuff he's been attached to, you know what? And the fact that he wants to make a Star Wars movie and that he's willing to forego an Avengers movie, granted, the MCU hasn't been exactly as hot as it has been in the past. Still, an Avengers movie that's a big thing, and the fact I'm cool with it. I'm cool with the fact that he was willing to, take a step back and just put his focus into Star Wars because that's what we need. That's the type of person we need or doing a movie. Someone who just is like, yep, my focus needs to be here, and that's a great thing. We don't get a lot of directors who are like that.
I'm torn on it. I like the idea. Um, it Levy's films have a very similar style. I know he can do differently because obviously, his episodes of Stranger Things, obviously nothing at all similar to his cinematic offerings, but his film stuff has always been very similar. And I don't know if it's anything, but he hasn't directed a movie in 10 years that doesn't have Ryan Reynolds in it. So, I don't know. Take that what you will. But it's interesting to me that he is. I don't want to say not doing an Avengers movie because of this, because if there's an Avengers movie I was going to skip as a director, it would be the clusterfuck that is this next one, because they do not, they kind of had to throw most of their plans out the window for that, and they're running by the seat of their pants on this one. So, I mean, of course, it's salvageable, very easily salvageable, if I'm being honest. But it's going to be interesting to see where they go with this. Putting this team back together with Tropper and Levy. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what type of film it is. We all sort of had hopes that Taika was going to be the one to break the mold of Star Wars and do something different.
Sounds like that thing's not even going to happen now.
And I mean, it's felt like that for a couple of years now at this point for me. But I feel like if this one can get off the
Fun, quick
ground,
question for you. You brought it up. You brought up Taika. It's another topic that they talk about on the most recent Making Star Wars episode, which strongly encourage anyone who has the time to go listen to the 80-minute episode to do, because they really dive into where they believe Lucasfilm is with the movies. Oddly enough, Ryan Reynolds is not a name they brought up. But now I have hopes that maybe he will be in this. But how long ago do you think it was that they announced Taika Waititi was doing a Star Wars movie?
Wasn't that like almost 2 years ago?
Try again.
I feel
Long.
like it was like 2019, 2020.
5 years ago.
Yeah, 2019.
Good Lord.
And
Yeah.
nothing has come from it. There's no script written. He's joked around about, having issues with an act. And I can tell you right now, when you listen to Making Star Wars and Best Ben Bulletin talk about it, and those two, in terms of like inside Star Wars knowledge, in terms of what's happening with projects, no one's more accurate. In terms of a Hollywood perspective, Jeff Snyder, while not being a Star Wars fan, has been very accurate with Star Wars. None of the three believe that movie's happening. So unless something changes massively, you can assume that one's out. You can assume the Donald Glover one is out. Um, it's hard when you announce thing after thing after thing, and none of them come to light. But it's also hard to hear about a Star Wars movie and then it possibly not come out till 2029 or 2030. It's long, long way off, right? But yeah, sorry, Johnny, continue.
Well, I mean, I feel like the long window is more realistic. From something being created out of whole cloth. This
Oh,
is
I agree. I
fully.
was just pointing out like 5 years and not even one draft of the script.
Oh yeah, there's not really much surprise to me on that regard as far as the Taika film goes, because you know it, it came about in the era where they were announcing things as soon as the idea happened.
Or
And
getting
that
who's
was
hot,
that
which
too.
this kinda fits that category.
Already having a writer is a further step than Taika ever got, except for him doing it himself. But you know, it. I like the idea of them waiting and taking their time with this because it allows it to be what it needs to be, and it allows it to be good. And if they are going to break the mold, which again, with this production team, I can't help but think that's what they're going to try and do. Either they're going for the long window because it's going to take that long to do, or They're going that long a window because there's already some degree of skepticism that they're going to try and do something that we don't want them to do. So let's just push the window and let it wither and die on the vine, which is unfortunately a realistic possibility. So I don't know. Again, I'm hopeful because I do like, I like Levy as a director, not just, you know, Deadpool and Stranger Things and all those things, but in general, his style has appealed to me. In the way he goes about his films, they've always felt different. They've always felt fun. And if there's one thing Star Wars is lacking to a degree, it's fun right now. And so, I mean, if he can inject some of that into it, I'm excited for it. Whether or not Ryan Reynolds ends up attached to this, I don't know. Like I said, I point out that Levy hasn't directed a film in 10 years that doesn't have him, but obviously he's done TV that doesn't have him, so it, it's interesting. I would like to see them collaborate in Star Wars. I think that could be fun. And, introduce us to a new character that has the most potential we've seen in a very long time. If there's any one actor, I think, who has the ability to sort of channel that void left in Star Wars by Han Solo, it's him. Both from a charisma standpoint and an acting standpoint, all of those things that Ryan has in spades.
It's all about what
It,
he gets to do, right? Like
absolutely.
Benicio del Toro is a great actor, and they gave him nothing. Gwendolyn Christie, she's a great actor. They gave her nothing. Like it all depends on the material too. At the end of the day,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's fun. I'm hopeful for this project, but the window is so far out that I'm not going to invest a lot of brain power into it and a lot of thought time into it because, as we've seen so many times in Star Wars, you get excited at the announcement and then the payoff never comes. So I'll wait. Once we get to a filming stage, then I'll get excited. Once we get casts, I'll get excited. But right now, this is one of those wing and a prayer. If it happens, I'm excited. If it doesn't, I haven't lost anything.
my hope is we get the Star Wars celebration next year in Japan, and they say this is one that we've moved up the ladder and that we're focusing on and zoning in on to jump the release schedule and putting it there. And interestingly enough, in that latest episode of Making Star Wars, it is, and I gotta stress, not a report, just an opinion from Bespin. And Randy, I want your take on this because you might not like how this sounds. I'm not even sure I liked how it sounds. But he went on to say, people aren't going to like how this sounds, but I believe that there's a better chance that we see the Sean Levy movie than we see the Ray movie, which the Ray movie at one point was scheduled to start filming this year. And you guys might remember about a month back we heard, well, it might film in 2025, and this person's writing, and that person's writing, and the writer's strike got in the way, and uh, I feel like the further we go here, the more the Ray movie becomes similar to the Taika Waititi movie, the Game of Thrones guys, Ryan Johnson, um, and I you hear about them starting filming and then it doesn't happen and consistently doesn't happen, and Daisy really hasn't even read a script yet, and just I get it. This is a very pessimistic episode, but I think we have to look at it for what it's like. And what it is there's a bunch of unknown question marks out there right now. Randy, what are your thoughts when you hear, arguably one of the biggest Star Wars insiders in the world say there's a real good chance we see the Levy movie before we see any Ray movie?
I mean, as much as it sucks just to think about that is, it seems like the Rey movie's been having just, so many contradicting reports that it's not surprising, to be honest, that there's talk like this. We know that for Levy, he's got his writer now, and he's devoted to making a Star Wars movie, and that's more than what we're getting from the other side. And because of that, it does seem more realistic at this point. Is it a shame? Of course, because it's not that Daisy Ridley's a bad actor. She's actually a really good actress. It's just giving Ray the proper story that she needs to kind of show that, to kind of separate herself from the sequel trilogy. And without that, without her reading a script, without there being a script, it's like you can't expect to fast track anything. I mean, at this point, anything Star Wars really shouldn't be fast tracked. But in this instance, yeah, you might as well just put the other one on the back burner or push it out, make sure people are all committed fully to it before announcing anything. And then just go with Levy and let him do his movie. And yeah, it's not like Ray's movie was meant to really be added onto anything or continue it off of something. It's a potential start of a different trilogy or a different set of movies, and it is what it is at this point. As we're all Star Wars fans, we've come to just accept this, and we shouldn't have to, but yet, what are we going to do? We can either try to sit here and be patient for more Star Wars content, which there's plenty out there beyond movies, but we want the movies. And it's not like we have the power to snap our fingers or wave a magic wand and boom, there's a movie. So just have to take the good with the bad, and we know that we're getting at least 2 to 3 new movies within the next 6-7 years. That's and then you know what? If that's best case scenario, so be it. I'd rather take that than have nothing coming out over the next 6 or 7 years.
The question is whether you're listening to this on podcast platforms or on YouTube podcast platforms, but obviously require you to go to YouTube and leave a comment. We are working on getting a Facebook group up that we can be somewhat active in and have a little following over there. But let us know in the comment section down below what you feel about the state of Star Wars and the movie lineup and where it could or might could or could not go. We are going to take a short little tiny break and try to lighten the mood in here a bit before coming back and talking about the Acolyte season finale with Johnny and the likelihood if there should be a season 2. We will be back right after this. Are you hungry for a new Star Wars game? Are you eager to play in the sandbox of the galaxy far, far away? Well, we have good news for you. Coming to fake video game stores everywhere, Midichlorians the Game Part 2, available in 3 months, maybe 2 years, maybe never, who knows, will be available on game store shelves soon. Pre-order today to play as Darth M. Count. All right, and we're back. That would have went better if I would have recorded it. Anywho, Johnny, we know you can't wait to play as Darth M. Count, man. We know you're just jumping at the bit for that. What is going on here? I swear I didn't do that on purpose. All right. The Acolyte season finale, man. The floor is yours. Randy and I talked about it last week. That stream is available up on the channel now if you want our thoughts. The floor is yours for a short little review here of the finale and what you thought of the series in whole.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to say I was right. I've been on the Khmer is an apprentice bandwagon since, well, forever. Um, I think that it was too little too late, as far as a weekly product goes. Again, I think that, you know, when we're rewatching this in the future, that being able to go from one episode directly into the next, and so forth, will be beneficial as far as a viewing experience goes, because the ending was good. Um, they did a good job of sort of wrapping up most of what they set up and still setting hooks for the future, which was obviously a good thing. Um, I, I, I feel like they spent too long with the May versus OSHA, who's good, who's evil, and who's on the right, who's on the wrong, and what actually happened, what didn't happen, and stuff like that. That by the time they paid it off, I didn't care so much, and it felt sort of like OSHA sort of turned on a dime, which I didn't like. They didn't build to her switching sides properly for me to enjoy it as much as I could have. So I felt like all of those things, sure they were good, but they weren't great. I'm not rushing back to rewatch any of these episodes anytime in the near future. And that sucks because there was so much potential here to want that. I there was a point about halfway through where I felt like, oh man, this is gonna end, and I'm just gonna rewatch the whole thing so that I can experience in one sort of rapid succession and experience it all one after the other, and experience the full force of what this is. That by the time it ended, I was kind of like, okay, that's good. I'm done. I'm glad this is over. I'm glad I don't have to come back next week to see this again. And that sucks for me. Like, I wanted so much more out of this that, again, this is one of those instances where time ruins so much about the Disney Plus series. If these episodes had been longer all the way through, you could have had a lot more time to flesh out, the changing of the good guys, the bad guys, the stories, fleshing them out so that everything didn't feel so rushed. Like that last episode was what, 42 minutes long?
It was 43 and change in actual runtime.
So, like it definitely needed to be longer for everything they tried to jam into it. What with May and Osha getting their reunion, to finding out what really happened, to learning the truth about their mother, to all of the things we did within that, adding in all of the extra stuff you went through with the Jedi Council, with Vernestra and the Counselor, trying to run the Inquisition, to all of that investigation stuff. There was too much. They tried to stuff the sausage too full, and the sausage exploded. Like, you can overstuff it. And they did. And it's unfortunate because individually, the plot points were all good. I loved the blink and you miss it sort of reactions. Like, I didn't watch it on Tuesday. I watched it on Wednesday night, and I was messaging Sean throughout it. And, I definitely caught the moment where Plagueis popped his head out in the cave. I caught that on first viewing. And, like, I love those sort of things. I love those moments. And then, you get to the end and you get Yoda showing up. And like I said to Sean when I messaged him, how is Yoda already that old? Like, this is 100 years ago, and he already looks like he does in the caves of Dagobah. Like, seriously, what the heck? How long a lifespan does this species have that he already looks like he's ready to retire and, you know, pass away in a cave on Dagobah, and this is 100 years ago. Like, he looked younger in the prequel saga than he did in this, which is ridiculous in and of itself. But it's, I don't know. It was an unnecessary thing. I think you would have been better served just doing that scene and having, Vernestra walk in, Master, I need to talk to you about whatever she said, and then you cut back to the shadow, and it's just the obviously Yoda shadow, because that species silhouette is obvious. Just seeing that shadow would have still gotten the reaction. You didn't need to see Yoda and see that. They crammed too much into too little time, and it hurt. And I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not happy, but I'm not sad. I don't feel like I don't feel let down by it, but it was all right.
Maybe if they would have had, or maybe if they wouldn't have had 3 episodes clock in at just over 25 minutes apiece and 2 more clock in at around 32 minutes apiece, there would have been time to properly tell a story. Like, not to hate on the show, but and Randy, I want I know you briefly touched on it at the beginning. And this is actually our final topic of the night. This, and if we'll get a season 2, we're gonna save game of the week till next week. I'm actually gonna try to take some time and play Jedi Survivor right here on the channel a little bit before then. So um, I the longer I sit with it, the more things I find to pick apart rather than praise. Again, I like the general premise of the story that they were trying to tell, but the execution is poor. It is. And I know, Kieran's not here tonight, and I'm sure he would roll his eyes at the runtime thing, but like, here's an example. Johnny, did you see House of the Dragon last night?
No.
Okay. So there's a scene in that involving 2 characters. And one character is someone who's been basically going through his own, the Shining type thing all season. And the other character I won't even mention, but the scenes are both earned and they come off really good. And you go, oh, okay, there's an arc here. We started at point 1 and now we've gone through points 2, 3, 4, and 5. We finally end up point 6, and it's like, that makes sense. That's a natural progression. And it's such a small thing, but I go back to like Jackie saying to Osha in like episode 3 or 4, like, oh, are you gonna miss me? It's like, you've spent like 8 minutes on screen together in the series, and you didn't know each other before then, and hardly any time's passed. It's just really bad execution, but in terms of that, it's also really bad writing. And things don't get a chance to breathe. Like, seriously, think about it. Think if these episodes had been twice as long and we had a chance to really, truly get to know Jackie or Yord on more than just a surface level. Their deaths in this series would have felt way more impactful.
Mhm.
And instead, like, I know for some people they were impactful, awesome, but they could have been even more. And it's frustrating to see corners cut like that, because they're not achieving good storytelling right now, despite having some good ideas, some really good ideas even. Um, I believe I said basically the same thing you did. Like, I thought the final episode was the best one in the series by some bit, probably, but also too little, too late. Randy, I'll throw it over to you. I don't know if you have any more detailed thoughts on the series itself, but I'm also going to let you bat lead off here. What's your gut tell you about season 2? And if there is no season 2, does that change the way you view season 1?
So ultimately, I think just based on the some of the negative press, some of the negative reviews, the numbers not being up there for what they were expecting, I don't think we're going to get a season two, which is a bit of a bummer because I feel like they did at least leave some things open that would have actually made it very compelling parts of season two. Obviously Vernestra and her ties to Chimera and learning more about that and his fall from grace as a Jedi would have been kind of cool to kind of dip into, because we all probably thought I know we all thought he was a kind of a dumbass during a good chunk of the series, and then but when he flipped that switch and he's revealed as the Sith or the apprentice or however we want to call him, that character was compelling. That character felt important, and it made me want to know more about the character. Now, chances are we'll probably get stuff, comics, books, whatever, but that's not what I want. I wanted to see it on the screen because that's how it was first introduced to me. Um, as a standalone season, you know, it was okay. It wasn't like, again, it wasn't earth shattering. It had a lot of great moments, a lot of great ideas. There was a lot of production issues that I feel like, damn you and your House of the Dragon. Never mind. Anyway, um, yes, there were issues with that respect, but some of the music was really good. Uh, Lee Jung Jae did a great job as Soul. Once Manny Jacinto ditched the Chimera persona and became the Stranger, he was knocking it out of the park. Um, it's one of those things. It's a shame. It's a shame that we didn't get more time. It's a shame that they weren't willing to give us more. And we deserved more. For all the hype behind this show, we deserved better as fans. Granted, yes, all the trolls and whatnot didn't help things much. And of course, people in Star Wars in general fighting back with the trolls, that's always the dumbest thing to do. You should never fight with the trolls. Just ignore them. That's how it's supposed to be. That's that ultimately all those things combined, the short run times, just not tightening up the script, too little too late, as we said with the finale, fighting with all the trolls, all that stuff just sunk the series. And if it doesn't get, and I like that's why I don't think it's going to get a second season, which is a shame. I feel like there is a lot there to unpack still, especially learning more about Plagueis now that we've seen him. He's there. And because of how the series ended up going as a whole, we may not get to know more unless we see something in books or comics or a video game. And that's the shame of it all. That really is. And I hate the fact that there's a lot of good actors in this who really did a great job of trying to tell a compelling story, but you're only as good as your script. You're only as good as your director. You're only going to be able to do so much with what you're given. And I feel like these guys just weren't given enough to truly make me care, with the exception of Soul. And that's the way, and that's the truth of it. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's you know, when the episode ended last week, naturally, my serotonin levels are probably high, and I like a lot of what they did, but sorry, Johnny, go ahead.
What? I mean, I think for me, if there's a lack of season 2, it wastes so much time in that finale. And I think that's something that would suck because that's extra time that could have been used to flesh out the stories that we did have complaints about. But yes, it was nice to see Plagueis, and it was nice to set up, Kaimi and Osha as the next, master and apprentice pair, and it was nice to get, sort of that confirmation that Vernestra was, Kymir's master once upon a time when he was a Padawan, and assume that she's the one who gave him that scar on his back, and it, seeing Yoda and setting up the future storylines were all great and good if you pay them off. And again, this is where sure, people are going to say, well, you can just do it in a book. Sure, you can. How many people are going to actually read that book? Like, as much as we talk about the audience, the number of people who watch the films is the biggest number. The number of people who watch TV is probably the next biggest number. And the number of people who read the books and comics is probably the smallest number. So,
Do yourselves a favor, read the Plagueis book. Listen to it, read it, make love to it, I don't know. But it's Legends. But I'm telling you, don't depend on this series to give you the Plagueis story. They had a chance to do that. They passed on it. And then seemingly tried to shoehorn him in at the end without any build. And I got to tell you, I've watched a bunch of reactions to the episode, and you can tell people that are just reaction channels that watched Star Wars casually had absolutely no fucking idea who that was or why he appeared. And even some diehards were like, was that Plagueis? Was it not Plagueis? I knew the second it happened. I'm like, well, that's Plagueis. But I'm in a small percentage of people. We are in a small percentage of people. Randy, I believe you had to explain to your wife who it was. I had to explain to Jade who it was. Like, I'm sorry, this finale does not work without a season 2. It will take what I thought was like an 8.75 quality of an episode and drop it to like probably a 6.5 or 7 because of what you said, Johnny. Wasted time. You won't get any payoff. I'm someone who, like, hey, you want to continue the story in books? Star Wars still to this day does a knockout audiobook job. Thank God Mark Thompson and Kevin Thompson are the ones guiding that still for the most part. So they make sure that shit, them and Penguin Random House Audio, they do such a good job. Hopefully, Disney doesn't fuck that up too. But I would be fine with it. But like Randy, that's not how I want to see that story come to a conclusion. I want to see it come to a conclusion on screen. But Disney and every studio in the world has to be more selective of how they spend their money now. The online reception is not good. There's more bad than good. Sorry, there just is. I don't even know what it is on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm going to pull it up. But the divisiveness, the Last Jedi effect, if you will. And if you don't think Star Wars changes paths based off of reception, they changed the entire path of their third sequel trilogy movie based off of reception, right or wrong. I think it was actually wrong now in hindsight. But it's, you know, much like Randy, I don't think season 2 is coming. I don't know if you actually said if you thought it was coming or not, Johnny. But I don't.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like flip a coin. Who knows how the coin's going to come down as far as whether or not they greenlight a season 2 or not. Like there's so many other projects I think ahead of it in the queue that it just I don't. I feel like they planned it to be one season, and then like halfway through they decided, well, maybe, and then now it's like no. So I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was always their intent to leave us with those cliffhangers and leave us with those answers that are answered in future books or comics or whatever avenue they end up going, or what. But it just, yeah, I feel like the odds say don't expect season two, and if it does, by the time we get it, we're not going to care about it.
And every TV show faces that problem, right? Having to wait too long in between seasons now. Um, and there's nothing written for this thing. Leslie Headland just did an interview talking about needing a break, like, well, while encouraging fans to, clamor for season two online. Um, if there's a season two, it's for one of two reasons. The numbers skyrocketed in the last 3 weeks because we know the numbers of the first 5 weeks. Um, or Kathleen Kennedy stubbornly said, I'm giving this girl another shot at this despite the online hate. Just to do the opposite of, maybe what she should. Um, but yeah. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that I believe. Sorry, Randy, do you have another point you wanted to get in there?
Well, because you had made a comment about Rotten Tomatoes, so I just brought it
Oh,
up
I'm
real
sorry.
quick.
Yeah.
So 80% from the critics, which we knew. I mean, from the critics, that the fact that it got an 80% is good. The
I'm
problem
stunned
here,
it's that high, to be honest.
the problem is the audience score of 17%. But then the big issue is how much of it's review bombing and how much of it's actually real dislike. Because it says it's 25,000 plus ratings. So the fact that 25,000 plus people reviewed this versus the 235 critics who reviewed it, I don't know. Like, I mean, we even saw articles where people were review bombing the wrong Acolyte. So it's like, I mean, are people hating it for the sake of hating it, or people hating it because they really don't like it? And that is the real issue here. It's like no one's people are just like, we're just going to jump on the bandwagon and hate the thing for hating it. How about just take the time to just watch it and actually be objective about it, kind of like how we were, because we have ways of viewing and reviewing certain things. Obviously we harped on production value all season long because we enjoy Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, so we see the difference in the quality in that respect. Whereas people here review bomb it just because they don't like the wokeness of it all. And honestly, I don't care about the woke shit. I just want to watch Star Wars, man. And if you give me a good story, I don't care. You could have a Wookiee scissoring scene. I would not care as long as it's a good, compelling story. And Johnny actually just visualized that. But you see what I'm saying? I don't care what you put in there. If it's a good story, it's compelling, and it draws me in, you've done your job. I don't care what you throw in there.
Yeah, I don't pay attention to audience scores. Critic scores I do because they're paid to do this for a living. It doesn't mean that your opinion needs to line up with a critic score.
Right.
But review bombing, until they find a way around that, it's going to affect both scales, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
people review bomb positively on some things without even seeing it, as they do negatively. To me, I'm looking at TV numbers, the conversation online, and the critic score. At the end of the day, TV numbers, which are, they're not like classic TV numbers anymore. Disney will know if they are going to do more, So even if Lucasfilm wants to do more, it's important to remember Disney at the end of the day can go, no, we're not giving you almost another $200 million to do that again. And I do think they need to sit down and change their entire approach to um, how they do TV content. We really need to get this guy over here to watch Andor past the first two episodes, because I do think it ends up getting into his wheelhouse. Um, I'm curious what the reception to Ant, because I do not have high hopes for Skeleton Crew. I hope I'm pleasantly surprised. Um, I'm going in not even cautiously optimistic. I'm going in expecting bad. That if it's okay, I'll be like, yeah, awesome, great. Um, but I'm curious how Andor season 2 gets received, right? Because they're doing 3 episode arcs, 12 episode series, and Andor doesn't give you 25-minute episodes. That's just not the way that show is constructed. And you're also not going on set and telling Tony Gilroy he has to do this or that, and that's just not how he operates, right? So I'm curious to see if maybe that will change things. But remember, people hated on Andor too because there wasn't enough, Force things, and it didn't feel like the traditional Star Wars. It felt like Rogue One Extreme almost. But I ended up loving that. You talked to me back in 2016, I probably hate that. So it is what it is. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications to all to keep up to date with all of our future content. I am going to be streaming, honestly, probably Jedi Survivor, and I'm going to get my ass back to the Phantom Menace and get some content up on this channel to help YouTube push it out more. We'll be back next week. Johnny, do you know if you have availability to return next week? Because I have an episode idea, but it's going to require a
Yeah,
little bit of work from us.
I don't have anything on schedule.
All right, so next week's episode, strap yourselves in. Randy just gave me the idea too, with something he said. We are going to rank the Disney Plus Star Wars series. And yeah,
Look
yeah.
at Johnny's face.
I'm busy. I'm busy. I swear.
You know what? Maybe I am busy next week.
I'm like, if you really sit there and think about it, though, obviously Johnny won't be able to give Andor a fair shake. But you'd have to watch a lot of episodes before then. But like, if you really think about it, you may not know where a Star Wars Disney Plus series sits for you until you actually compare it to the other, seasons. So when I say that, I'm talking Mando season 1, Mando season 2, Mando season 3, which I think Mando's the only one with multiple seasons, right? I believe so.
Well, up until
I
Andor,
mean,
because
Up
now
until
Andor's going to
Andor.
have.
Andor will be
unless you count like Tales of the Jedi.
No, we're not going to do. Well,
We're doing live action series only then.
yeah, I think that would probably be fair because, like, we both have. I think we'd all have Clone Wars pretty high.
Rebels. Rebels will be
Disney
up there for me.
Plus? Or,
Rebels
Disney.
wasn't a Disney Plus series, but it was a Disney series. But I think they changed the way they do content when Disney Plus started, right? So,
They did.
how about this? Anything that has come out on Disney Plus,
Okay.
we will rank, animated or not. So Clone Wars will be eligible in there. Tales of the Jedi season. Well, actually, it's not even Tales of the Jedi, right? You only got one season of Tales of the
Tales
Jedi.
of the Jedi
And
and Tales
they
of the
did
Sith, but I kind of...
Tales of the Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they got Star Wars Visions, which I finally got through, seasons 1 and 2. So there's a bunch to rank there. And I think what we'll do is we'll take our lists. We'll find out if Kieran's going to be on the episode. Even if Tommy B's not on, we'll get him to rank it. And we'll have our own individual lists that we'll go over. But then we'll also have the what did all of our lists put together compile between the 5 of us, which I think can be intriguing too. So yeah, tune into that. We'll eventually get to the lightsaber thing. I want to plan that one out more thoroughly than winging it. So we'll get to the lightsaber duel episodes in the near future. If you're looking for other content, Halloween and horror available over on Haddonfield and beyond. If you're looking for Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Westeros content, that's at the Legacy of Westeros. We are going to do a SummerSlam and an all-in preview and prediction shows and review shows for both of those events. So stay tuned for details on that. That'll be over on the Phantom Haven channel. Jade and I will have a out of the theater reaction to Wolverine and Deadpool on Thursday night, and there'll be a video that'll be on Phantom Haven, and there'll be a video going up on Haddonfield and Beyond tomorrow about the Batman 2 and a massive update that just came out today regarding that project. But for Randy and Johnny, I'm Sean, and we'll see you next time on the legacy of Star Wars. I cannot promise you if Darth M. Count will be here or not.